Another question, there was a robbery in the apartment next door to mine, and several cars on my street have been broken into. I'm scared for my safety. Is this grounds to terminate my lease?
Short answer on that is no.
No.
It is not.
Okay.
Your lease is a contract, as John has stated, and that contract, nowhere in there provides for that. We've never seen a lease that says if your neighbors, something happens to your neighbors. But in New Orleans especially, we see a lot of areas that have a lot of crime problems. But that's why we say before you move in and before you sign that lease contract to kind of check out the neighborhood, ask around and look into that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the instances where a tenant can get out of a lease early, when it's not a disaster or it's not some other kind of unusual situation, they're actually pretty limited. Louisiana doesn't have a bright line early lease termination statute or code article. Occasionally you will see in a lease that if I forfeit my deposit, or maybe I pay an extra month's rent, maybe I can get out of a bad situation, or maybe I've taken a job somewhere else.
Right.
I need to move out of town. But the only folks that there are a couple of federal laws that give protections for early lease termination in limited circumstances to certain folks, and one of them is military folks in the military. Let's say you get called up on active duty, you can get out of your lease early and not have to worry about being sued for the rest of the months. If you're a domestic violence victim, and if you're living in subsidized housing, there are some protections there. When the safety of the family is in jeopardy, or the domestic violence victim is in jeopardy.
And to be clear about that, that's only for subsidized housing.
That's
that
correct.
Does not include
so
private.
far
So
in
far,
our state.
right? Okay.
And then the last situation that occasionally comes up where a tenant can get out of a lease early is if they are disabled or become disabled while they're living in the apartment, and they need a first floor unit, or they need an accessible unit. You may be able to get out of your lease without penalty.
Well, I want to add to that because I take a slightly more aggressive position, and that is the following. If you have a written lease, and the lease has some of these outrageous provisions in it that we've mentioned, we've given examples of, and a lot of times they do, because these landlords, they're not lawyers, and maybe they don't know any better, maybe they think they're being clever, and they have these provisions that make you pay the cost if something breaks. They have stuff that says just things that are just unlawful. If that lease is if it's one of those leases, in my opinion, depending on the case, you may be able to break the lease by saying, you had me sign a lease that is unlawful. Now, this is the kind of thing you would need to consult with a lawyer about. You don't want to just try and play your own lawyer here, but if you're trying to get out of a 12-month lease, a 6-month lease, early on in the lease, you may be able to get out of it because the lease is unlawful. And that might not be something that Southeast Louisiana Legal Services gets involved in, although you might look at a lease and give an opinion if you think it's a good lease or not for people who qualify for your services. But that may be an out for you. That's all I'm suggesting.